Order. At this time, I'll ask if there are any public comment on any items not currently listed on the agenda. And seeing none, then we'll move forward to the first matter of business, which is adoption of the Planning Commission minutes for 6/28 of 2010. Are there any changes, comments, additions?
None. No, I have none.
All right, and we have none, so I'll look for motion to accept those as written. Motion, second?
Second.
Second. Call roll.
Commissioner Stein. Aye. Commissioner Lajoie. Aye. Commissioner Tidwell.
Aye.
Sure.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, on to the first Planning Commission hearing, which is WR 10-02 Natural Resource Overlay District Water Resource. And this is for the Jug Handle project. And I'll read the legal information for this at this time. Staff report has been prepared for the application. It has been made available 7 days prior to this evening's hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to the applicant's proposal. If anyone would like me to read those criteria, please let me know. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report along with any written comments and input that has been received through the public notification process for the application. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart over here, to my right. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a slip and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. All letters, reports, and pictures must be marked as an exhibit by the planning staff before they can be submitted into the record. For the public record, please begin all testimony by stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe they should apply to the application under consideration. A person does not have to testify in order to submit written materials in any length while the public record is open on each application. However, any party wishing for a continuance or to keep the record open must make that request before the public hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue which you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the Commission's consideration. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence so that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be adjudged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the Oregon Revised Statutes 197-796 requires us to announce the following. The failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damage in circuit court. At this time, I'll ask any of the commissioners having ex parte contact, conflict of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare.
I do not. I use the traffic facilities almost daily.
Each and every day, as I do too.
So I'm familiar with the area.
Okay. Okay, then we will move on to the procedure tonight. We'll begin with the staff report. And Pete, that's you, I bet.
Yep.
And we will move on to you. Any other correspondence? Just what we have.
We do have an exhibit to add into the record. It was missing from the staff report. It's in front of you. It's a color map of the adjacent zoning in the project vicinity. And we're going to enter that into the record as Exhibit 1. We've had some updated material from the applicant that's been uploaded to your computers. And that includes items that are on the very bottom of all of those exhibits that you see. In particular, those are the PowerPoint presentation that Nancy Crashaw will be presenting, Kristen Kearns will be presenting tonight. Also, we have a revised tree mitigation summary, revised tree removal locations and species, and a revised flood management overlay district report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, we're going to leave it up to you.
All right, thank you, Chair Powell. The Jug Handle project is a right-of-way transportation improvement project, and the project is going to occur in the vicinity of the I-205 interchange and affect Redland Road, Clackamas River Drive, Washington Street, and portions of OR 213. The road consists of widening and also the addition of a road underpass known as the Jug Handle that will connect Washington Street over to Clackamas River Drive. The project is going to affect right-of-way, which is in 3 overlay districts on Oregon City, which are regulated by our city code. There's the Flood Management Overlay District, which requires balance cuts and fills so as not to affect floodwaters. There's the Natural Resource Overlay District, which protects streams and wetlands and habitat associated with those sensitive areas. So that's a major part of the review tonight. There's also the Geologic Hazard Overlay District, which triggers review under the Geologic Hazard Overlay District, and we're going to briefly go through those. The first overlay district is the floodplain review, and that's covered under Oregon City Municipal Code 17.42. The applicant has demonstrated that where they're going to be doing the mitigation area for this is also where they're going to be doing both their natural resource overlay mitigation and their floodplain mitigation in the same area, which is an area that is owned by the Urban Renewal Commission of the city. It's consisting of about a 4.6 acre area within 2 tax lots that are owned by the Urban Renewal Commission. The project will impact various maps, streams, wetlands, and ditches that are regulated by the city and the state. And the applicant has conducted a detailed delineation of all of the streams and wetlands and the associated vegetative corridor widths with those on-site features that would be impacted by the roadway project. The applicants already applied to the Oregon Department of State Lands, the Corps of Engineers, the Oregon Department of Transportation, who's funding the Jug Handle project, and they're in pursuit of all necessary permits that are required by those agencies as well. As I said, I've got an exhibit in your packet which shows what the adjacent zoning is of all the properties adjacent to this project. The majority of the area where the project will immediately impact is the Metro South Transfer Station property, which is zoned GI, General Industrial. That's in the area over here. You've also got the Rawson landfill site, and the areas to the left of it, all of which is zoned MED, mixed use downtown. And then we've got the Stein Oil piece, which is where the proposed roundabout will go, is zoned C, General Commercial. But we're not reviewing this project for compliance with any base zone underlying set standards like setbacks or building footprints of that nature. All of the project will be in right-of-way that's either already dedicated or in the process of being dedicated. So this is a type 3 review. Since it was a discretionary review, the scale of the project essentially necessitated that we review it at the Planning Commission level. The applicant is also requesting adjustments to certain code criteria. Specific adjustments that they're requesting are a adjustment to the required 2-to-1 mitigation area to impact area ratio. And they have explicitly defined why they're requesting that adjustment. The project is going to impact approximately 4.6 acres of natural resource delineated corridor buffer area. And the buffers that are defined under the code range from 50 feet for wetlands and the tops of banks of perennial streams to 200 feet for fish-bearing streams. And those are identified in the map that is the map of field delineated NROD buffers, which is you'll see that underneath the NROD code responses. That document shows what the city has mapped in a yellow overlay zone and where the actual delineated buffers are through the site delineation, which are in red. And so the total area of impacted NROD buffer affected by this project is 4.6 acres. Flood management area standards have been covered under 17.4160. The applicant has delineated where the bank fill stage is for all of the fill and cut and fills that are proposed in the mitigation area, and has shown compliance with all of those standards. Natural Resource Overlay District standards are Chapter 1749. So what I'm going to do is skip ahead to the adjustment criteria. That is defined under 1749 190 and 1749 200. 1749 190 is a part of the code where an applicant can request an alternative mitigation standard. That part of the code also requires that there be a minimum 2-to-1 mitigation ratio of mitigation area to proposed disturbance area. The applicant has requested an adjustment to this standard pursuant to the criteria of 1749-200. The applicant, Mason Bucci-Gerard, who's the biologist, conduct all the delineation and could also do the mitigation plan for the NROD. Their report was reviewed by David Evans and Associates, which is the city's on-call wetland specialist. And David Evans and Associates found that the adjustment criteria had been met and that the proposed mitigation ratio of 1-to-1 was sufficient. And I'll briefly go through those adjustment criteria. An applicant that requests an adjustment from the NROD needs to show that all of the following criteria are met. That includes the following finding: that there are no feasible alternatives for the proposed use or activity to be located outside the NROD area or to be located inside the NROD area and be designed in a way that will meet all of the applicable standards. The applicant has described in their section 5 of their report impacts, a discussion on avoidance and minimization measures. Based on that analysis, they found that this project utilizes one of the smaller project footprints. They did 9 analyses to look at this. It requires a smaller amount of roadway compared to other alternatives. It does not require additional stream crossings. It does not permanently impact a large non-delineated wetland or associated NROD buffer that's located west of the Union Pacific Railroad Bridge. And it does not impact Stream 16, which is a perennial stream, or Abernathy Creek, or the associated buffers of Abernathy Creek, which is a salmonberry stream. However, unavoidable impacts to the NROD are necessary in order to do this project. So staff concurs with the applicant's analysis there. We also concur with the other approval criteria, that the proposal has fewer adverse impacts on significant resources and resource functions found in the local NROD area than other actions that would meet the applicable standards, that the proposed use or activity proposes the minimum intrusion into the NROD area that's necessary to meet development objectives. Fish and wildlife passage will not be impeded. And with the exception of the 2-to-1 ratio request adjustment, all other standards are being met. In a general explanatory way, a lot of the NROD buffer that is currently mapped that would be impacted by this project is of a degraded nature as well. And the mitigation site is also degraded, and the applicant can talk about that in a little more detail. What they're proposing to do in mitigation is to bring that degraded invasive species, remove all the invasive species, and they propose to replant that area with native species according to the city's planting spacing requirements, and that ultimately results in a fair number of trees and shrubs. I believe over 3,000 trees and shrubs that will be replanted in the mitigation site. So essentially, they're going for a contiguous mitigation site in one area that is maintained and owned by the city, as opposed to strips of mitigation immediately adjacent to the impacted roadway. And the biologists can talk about that in more detail in terms of how it improves the functional value of the habitat associated and protected by the NROD. The second item that required a Type 3 review is a variance to the retaining wall standards in our geologic hazard overlay zone. A couple of retaining walls that need to be built with this project that, due to space constraints, were not able to be terraced according to the standards of the geologic hazard overlay zone. And that terracing requirement is primarily an aesthetic requirement. It requires that if you have a retaining wall over a certain height, you've got to step it back and landscape it. And due to space constraints that the applicant's going to talk about, with the widening of the road and the needed pedestrian improvements right next to the road, they're requesting a variance to that standard. Let's see. So staff is it's a very large project. It's very complex. I haven't gone into a great deal of detail on all of the delineations that have been done for all of the different streams, but I'm willing to answer any questions that the Planning Commission has. And we are recommending approval with conditions for the variance to the Geologic Hazard Overlay District and the requested adjustment to the mitigation area ratio of the Natural Resource Overlay District standards, and the floodplain review and mitigation as well. Recommended conditions of approval we provided on page 37 of the staff report. In brief, they have to show compliance with city's engineering policy. They have to install all tree protection measures prior to construction. They need to show that all correspondence with the DSL, Army Corps of Engineers, and Division of Fish and Wildlife is finalized and submitted to the city for review prior to construction approval. That's in process. Install all approved erosion control measures prior to grading or construction. There's a requirement for a deed restriction or legal instrument to assure that the mitigation site is established according to the criteria in the code to a 80% standard by a 5-year period. And that will run with the land, and the final format of that will be finalized by the city attorney. We will be requesting a final tree removal, protection, and mitigation plan for approval by the Planning Division for any trees removed over 6 inches. In addition to that, there will be a final replanting plan requirement for the NROD mitigation area, and also a street tree plan that is going to be developed pursuant to Public and Street Trees chapter of the City Code, which is 1208. Essentially, 43 street trees along the frontage of the existing right-of-way are going to need to be removed for widening of the right-of-way, and those would need to be mitigated for as well. And so we're kind of keeping our counts separate for the various trees that will be removed and mitigated for, but the overall tree mitigation requirements for the project area are in the report that the applicant has provided in the, let's see, the final, at least final debate, revised tree mitigation summary. And they've calculated 347 mitigation trees are required. We'll check that number as the project moves through the final planning stages and finalize that number. But the applicant has done a detailed tree inventory and documented all the species and caliper of all the trees that will be removed, and that's what's submitted into the record tonight. So we're recommending approval with those conditions. I think the only other thing I haven't talked about is that utility line placement in the Natural Resource Overlay District is a separate standard for that. There will be a utility line connection for irrigation purposes that was not anticipated in the initial application. The square footage of that falls within the realm for a exempt use, essentially. If you have a utility line in the NROD that needs to be put through, as long as it falls under, I believe, a square footage of, I want to say it's either 10 cubic yards or 100 square feet. Yeah, then as long as you replant that area pursuant to NROD standards, it doesn't require NROD review. And it sounds as if this utility line will fall under that standard, but either way, it was recommended as a condition of approval that be included in the mitigation area as a final condition of approval. And that's all I have to say at this point.
Okay, any questions at this point?
No.
I'm just interested in, I guess, the metro piece. You know, what's do they have, I know they came in prior to us having any long-term planning. I'm just curious if there's been any discussion, or if we have, you know, what's going to happen there long term. Are they planning on making any changes? Because that certainly could impact a lot of things in this.
As far as long-term use of the metro parcel,
as it is today.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything that Metro is talking about at this point. However, perhaps the applicant didn't talk to that when they.
I would assume you had discussion with them. That'd be interesting. I'd just be interested to hear what the plan is as you go through this.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, then if that's no questions from Pete, we'll move on and call the applicant at this point. Okay.
We don't have any public comment.
No, we don't have any at this point, and I noticed that. So, the hearing is open. Let's bring up the applicant to their presentation.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
They can hear you.
Is that on?
I think you're on.
It's on. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you hear.
Good evening. My name is Bob Goodrich, and I work with Elbeck Consulting Engineers. I'm the assistant project manager for the Jug Handle project. We're leading the consultant team that's designing the project. With me this evening, to my far right, is Kate Parker from Mason, Bruce & Gerard. She's the public involvement lead. To my right is Kristen Curran. She's also from Mason, Bruce & Gerard. She is the environmental biological lead. Behind her is Hermanus Stein. He works with Kittleson & Associates, and he is the traffic engineering lead for the project. We'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to come before the Planning Commission this evening and present the project to you, and we thank you for your consideration. And with that, I'd like to bring Kristen up to do the NROD presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Good evening again. My name is Kristen Kearns. My name is experience as a biologist and wetland scientist. And my friend Mason, Bruce, and Gerard is providing consulting services for the Public Works Department for this project. We're responsible for conducting our wetland delineation as Peter described, all the wetland permitting for the project, Endangered Species Act documentation, and of course preparing the NROD application. And tonight I'll be discussing our methodology for determining the NROD buffers, which Pete alluded to, our proposed impacts within the NROD buffers, and mitigation for unavoidable impacts within these buffers. The Public Works Department, as the project applicant, made the decision to ground truth the actual boundaries of wetland streams and ponds by conducting field work within the disturbance footprint. This is to ensure that the features were properly identified and mitigated for. The wetland stream and pond ground truthing methodology was based on the Army Corps of Engineers 1987 wetland delineation methodology as supplemented by Mountains, Valleys, and Coast Supplement. This is the approved methodology for wetland delineations in the state of Oregon. The boundaries for wetland streams and ponds were then flagged by wetland scientists in the field, and then they were surveyed by professional land surveyors to an accuracy of about 1/10 of a foot. We then prepared and submitted a wetland delineation that was submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of State Lands, and we have since received jurisdictional determination and letter of concurrence on the location of the wetland, stream, and pond boundaries from both agencies. After the fieldwork was conducted, we have applied Municipal Code 1749-110, which is shown in this slide, to each wetland, stream, and pond to determine the width of each NROD buffer. Now, there are obvious differences between the city's NROD mapping and the mapping conducted for this project. The red outline on the screen, as you can see here, represents the project's disturbance footprint. The orange areas on the screen represent the city's NROD mapping, and the blue areas represent the NROD boundaries determined for this project, which were only maps within the red outline project disturbance footprint. And it's my understanding that the city has taken a cost-effective, conservative approach to mapping all of the NROD boundaries throughout the entire city. And as we were working with a relatively small area, we were able to refine the buffer locations based on the ground truthing fieldwork. So as you can see, there are areas where this project's NROD buffer is smaller than the city's buffer, some areas up here to the north. But there are also areas where the project's buffer extends outside of the city's buffer, as you can see in areas here and farther to the south along here. During the ground truthing fieldwork, we encountered several roadside runoff ditches within the project footprint that were created for the purposes of conveying stormwater during precipitation events. And then during our mapping process, we realized that these roadside runoff ditches had been provided NROD buffers in the city's mapping. Oregon City Municipal Code 1749-20 states that NROD protects as one connected system the habitats and associated functions of the streams, riparian corridors, wetlands, and the regulated upland habitats found in Oregon City. Our interpretation of the code does not include stormwater drainage ditches. This is supported by Clean Water Services' definition of a water quality sensitive feature, which does specifically exclude stormwater ditches. So after we determined the NROD buffer widths, we overlaid the project's disturbance footprint to determine the project's NROD impacts as shown in this table. All NROD impacts would be permanent, that is to say that the impacts would permanently remove vegetation within the NROD boundary. The next several slides give you a better idea of the quality of NROD buffers that would be impacted by the proposed projects. This photo shows Wetland B in the center with the NROD buffer on either side. The Welcome to Oregon City sign and Washington Street are behind the photographer, and Highway 213 is almost visible in the upper right-hand corner of the photo. As you can see, the NROD buffer is located within a mowed landscaped area that's been planted with mostly non-native species. Proposed impacts of the Wetland B NROD buffer will be the largest within the project footprint, encompassing about 1.5 acres. This photo shows Wetland C in the foreground and the Wetland C NROD buffer in the background. Stein Oil, or the 76 gas station, is located in the photo background. The Wetland C NROD buffer would comprise the second largest impact of 0.8 of an acre within the project footprint. This buffer is dominated by the invasive Himalayan blackberry with a few scattered black cottonwood. Stream 16, Wetland F, and their NROD buffers are shown in this photo. Highway 213 is located at the top of the slope up here. The red line in the photo shows the approximate location of the impacts limits. And as you can see, the project impacts will occur within the road fill slope and will constitute very narrow impacts. This is the same stream on the west side of Highway 213. The red line again indicates the approximate impact area limits and shows additional narrow impacts within a highly disturbed vegetation community. And finally, this is a photo of Stream 15 located immediately east of Clackamas River Drive. The red line again shows the approximate impact limits. The NROD buffer surrounding the stream in this photo is dominated by Himalayan blackberry and is again highly disturbed. So due to the heavily degraded condition of these NROD buffers, mitigation based on providing much higher quality functions and values at a ratio of 1:1 is proposed. From the start of the project, the Public Works Department and consultant team have made every effort to meet the intent of the city's NROD and NROD mitigation code. And to this end, the mitigation site has been designed to address functional values B and C from Municipal Code 1749-10, which concentrate on protecting, restoring, and enhancing floodplains, upland, and riparian habitats. One way we intend to meet these goals is through appropriate mitigation site selection. So in this slide, you can see Highway 213 here, Washington Street, and the mitigation site located between Interstate 205 and the Union Pacific Railroad tracks here. One of our goals is to keep the NROD mitigation as close to the impacts as possible. And to that end, the mitigation site is proposed approximately 225 feet north of the proposed projects. This photo shows the mitigation site in its current condition. Interstate 205 is the photographer's back, and the Union Pacific Railroad tracks are located in the background. The proposed mitigation site is located within a heavily degraded area, which is dominated mainly by noxious weeds, including Himalayan blackberry and Scotch broom. The proposed site is located on a former log mill deck that has 10 to 15 feet of wood chip debris at the top of the soil profile. Due to the degraded condition of the mitigation site, there's a great deal of enhancement opportunity here. Proposed mitigation is also located entirely within the floodplain, as Pete had mentioned. Over 40,000 cubic yards of wood waste material will be removed from the mitigation site for floodplain mitigation. We will also remove noxious weeds from the site at the same time. NROD mitigation will take place after the floodplain mitigation has been completed. Topsoil will be reintroduced, and then the site will be planted with trees, shrubs, and herbaceous species, all of which are included on the Oregon City's native plant list as shown on the screen. 762 trees and 436 shrubs per acre will be planted at the 4.7 acre site for a total of over 3,500 trees and 2,000 shrubs. One of the most important ways we're planning to ensure that the NROD functions and values will be replaced and that the mitigation site will be successful is through a thorough monitoring plan and use of appropriate success criteria. 5 years of vegetation monitoring will be conducted to ensure that there is at least 80% survival of trees and shrubs and no more than 10% cover of noxious weeds throughout the mitigation site. And finally, we plan to ensure success by providing irrigation throughout the site and at least 5 years of maintenance to ensure plant establishment. The goal of mitigation, the NROD mitigation site is to provide much higher quality functions and values than what is impacted within the NROD buffers. Overall, we are proposing to provide mitigation based on habitat quality that is designed to improve water quality by providing shade and vegetation structure to remove sediment and slow water flow. The mitigation site will also improve wildlife habitat through native species planting and noxious weed removal. Thank you for your time. We'll be happy to answer your questions. But right now I'll turn the presentation over to Nancy, who will discuss the geologic hazard overlay district application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Powell and Planning Commissioners. Nice to see you. And just for the record, I wanted to know that this there will be trees cut down in this project, and so this public hearing is one of the avenues that we would choose to let that be known, and that there's a significant tree mitigation plan proposed with the project. I'm here to talk about the geologic hazard variance request, and on the wall over there, which might be a little difficult to see, we have brought some drawings that show the retaining walls. I also have some slides, which, oh gosh, I think I have to go down. What else? Okay, let me just quickly go through those so that you can, we have a retaining wall. Recognize the site vicinity map, and we are here to discuss two retaining walls tonight. One, retaining wall number 1, which I don't think you see the arrow on your screen, but do you have this on? Okay, so this is on your screen. Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, so retaining wall number 1 is down south of the Holcomb Bridge, Holcomb Boulevard overcrossing of 213. It's actually kind of to the north of it, and goes a pretty long distance. The other wall, just so you're aware, is up here to the north of the existing Stein Oil, and it'll be below the Stein Oil site, and it'll be used to create a portion where the new Washington Street alignment is going to be. And this is the retaining wall number 1. I can actually go through my notes and just use these diagrams. Retaining wall number 1 is 808 feet long. It's fairly significant in length, and it averages the height ranges from 2 to 18 feet, with an average height of 13 feet. It's pretty. You can imagine what this is going to look like along Highway 213, typical of highway construction. And in this particular, let's see, I'll go one more slide here. This gives you an idea of what it would look like to the driver. Now keep in mind that this area out here is fairly vast, because Highway 213 has a very wide cross-section, and then there's quite a bit of geography around this area. There's a lot of topographical changes. So in some ways it's going to be a massive wall, but I would say that in many ways it's going to kind of be dwarfed by the overall expanse of the area. And retaining wall number 2 is quite a bit smaller. It's 109 feet wide, or long, with a height of 2 to 7 feet. But it's going to sit on top of an 18-foot high slope. So what we're trying to do is balance the height of the wall and the height of the slope and make them fit so we can fit Washington Street in between it and the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. This one is, let me go back to the first retaining wall. I'm going to now go back to this slide. Oh, wait, one more on this. This shows, this is actually very helpful to show the cross-section of the car, the road, the slope, and then the wall. And as you can see here, what we are introducing with this, in this particular part of the project location, is a new sidewalk connection between, essentially between Clackamas River Drive and Highway 213. It'll be constructed on top of this wall. On the retaining wall number 1, we're asking for a 13-foot variance for the wall face. Wall faces in our code are intended not to exceed 5 feet in height, and everything's supposed to be terraced. And there's this.
And you can't terrace because of the right-of-way? Because it's too dominant right-of-way?
We would need to get more right-of-way, but I'll kind of explain why we're proposing not to terrace.
Okay, I'll let you know that.
Okay. On retaining wall number 2, we're asking for a 2-foot variance on the wall face because it is up to 7 feet high. And then because we have an 18-foot high cut slope, the code only allows for 15-foot high cut slopes. We're asking for a 3-foot variance for the finished cut slope. One thing that I wanted to mention is I brought some examples of wall surface types that are being used. I think you've probably seen it, the Highway 213 Beaver Creek Road intersection project. We were careful to select a retaining wall material, concrete material that had an architectural face on it that wasn't just plain old concrete. And I think that's really important to do, and that's what we're proposing to do on this project as well. Here's some other examples. I think the project team likes these better, and these are a little not quite as attractive in my opinion.
That one down the lower picture is exactly what I was concerned about seeing there, and I was going to ask you if it was like the one over by the metro, or by the train, which is what it looks like that is. Okay.
And so who controls the look? Is that Public Works or is it ODOT?
It's actually the project team, and the people that are on that project team includes Public Works and ODOT. And then we also have a number of public involvement pieces. So we have some public meetings, and we show the design, and we would show some wall types and make sure that we don't get any really angry reactions to them. But of course, we only have so many types that we can practically use, and we have to keep things within the budget. But these are two examples of very possible.
So there's a process for actually selecting.
Yeah, it's not like a formal process where you go through an architectural review board, but the project team reviews them, costs them, decides what we think would fit in well down there, and then we'll show it in the public involvement. We won't have a committee that's selecting it though.
Do any of those styles have better acoustic attenuation, I suppose, than others? For example, some of these walls produce more noise or quiet noise less than the other walls.
I think concrete is pretty much concrete, but I would probably want to ask one of the wall designers that question.
It seems like they put lots of surface area onto the wall in order to buffer the sounds.
Yeah, and I think that again, I'm not an acoustic expert, but we could certainly come back and try to fill you in on that information. I listed the grounds for granting a variance, but I'm not going to read through these. They're in your report, or they're in our application as well as in the code. And Pete has addressed these along with my application. He's addressed them in the staff report. I guess I can sit back. So number one, what I've tried to do here summarize, because we do have a limited presentation time length, but for the variance, for wall number one, which is we're asking for the 13-foot variance from the 5 feet because it goes up to 18 feet. One thing I want to point out is the entire wall isn't 18 feet tall, as you can see, but it kind of goes up and down. So, but it is still the maximum height is 18 feet. So we're asking for a 13-foot variance. And in addressing all of the grounds for variance, what we concluded is that in doing one retaining wall, we don't have to go nearly as far back into that slope that's below the homes that are up on the Holcomb Overlook. And we felt that that was really important because the more you cut in over there to get those terraces, it opens up the sound for one thing, and it also really shrinks the buffer between the road and the edge of the infrastructure with those properties up above. The other thing that's important to me, especially in the geologic hazard side of things, is the more we cut into that slope, the more we're sort of we're disturbing the overall sort of the general stability of that whole slope in there. And I really am kind of concerned if we kept cutting back and going up the slope, that we could impact global stability in that area. The other thing that having just one retaining wall is that it protects the Holcomb Overlook or Holcomb Overcrossing, the bridge that's there, because it goes along the edge of that bridge abutment. And if we had to terrace back, it would be impacting, that whole excavation would be impacting the Holcomb Bridge. And there's part of the code is in here talking about making sure it's done right. And we have expert structural designers. And we also have expert drainage management for these retaining walls. So we won't be causing detrimental impacts to the drainage in the area. I mentioned we're wanting to have architectural detailing to mitigate the appearance of the wall. And staying within these confines minimizes the highway footprint. Then it also maintains the integrity of the adjacent terrain. And I went through all the comprehensive plan goals and policies that I thought applied, and we found that it was consistent. We didn't find anything that was glaringly in opposition to the comprehensive plan. And then for wall number 2, those we felt like we met the different variance grounds by providing a new pedestrian connection at the top of the wall. And what's interesting to note at this location is that the slope that's out there today is actually a man-made slope. And so it's not even a natural geologic feature that we're trying to apply our code to. But nonetheless, it is a steep slope. And actually, we feel like this retaining wall is probably going to be more stable than the existing slope that's out there. And particularly in creating this Washington Street the realignment of Washington Street, obviously the slope is needed to stabilize the cut that will be affecting that slope. I mentioned we're trying to balance the wall face and slope heights. We looked at a higher wall and a shorter slope. We looked at and it was really like, it seemed like this wall face height and this slope height were about as close as we could come to balancing and minimizing the variance we were needing to request. And of course, the geometry of the area also requires that a certain amount of slope and a certain amount of wall be used. Otherwise, we couldn't fit the road in and still have slopes that aren't too steep. Or you could just put in one big wall, and that wasn't something we wanted to do either. Again, we've got the expert structural design and drainage management. And the thing we're doing over at this location that we think is going to help mitigate this height, the slope height, is there's a very elaborate landscaping plan designed by a landscape architect for this area. And that along with architectural detailing on the wall, we believe will mitigate the appearance. And again, we didn't find any inconsistencies with the comprehensive plan goals and policies that apply to this kind of a project. And that concludes my presentation on that. You wanted me to mention about the Metro site, and we have worked with Metro because we had to acquire some right-of-way from Metro. They do not have any plans to move from that site today, but they do foresee in the long term that they will be finding another location. It's difficult to find a location for a transfer station. And they've invested a lot of money into that site so that it works as a regional facility. We provide service for many, many people. But for now, they're planning to stay, and I think they're looking around and also wondering how they're going to be managing solid waste as time goes on. They're looking at a few different solid waste industries changing, and so they have no firm plans to move at this time.
Okay, well, that's good. It's just, it would be interesting in the long-term plan just to know how to mitigate that area, because if it becomes retail, for instance, how is that going to affect what we're doing today with the riparian behind it?
Oh, right, right.
Which is something to think about long-term, and since we don't have a master plan with them, it's hard to know, and it's the top of my mind when I'm looking at it.
We have considered traffic for even if the site redeveloped in the design, and we are also working with Metro on making some improvements to the pond that's out there, the Metro pond. A lot of people don't even know it's there, but when you get there, it's just a fabulous pond. It's got, from what I understand, it has this incredible diversity in plant species and trees and places that birds love and all this stuff. It's supposed to be that way, and it is that way, but could you really use a little more of a welcoming entrance, and so people know it's there. People could know it's there, so they get a little walk around the trail. And so we were hoping, as part of our project, to maybe get some schools or try to make that part of our public involvement, is to have some people get involved in making the Metro Pond more accessible and desirable to access by the public. And that might be nice if they would leave it that way then, if they ever did move.
Yeah. I've got a question on wall, the wall one.
Okay.
Is that the large wall?
I forgot to put slideshow down. I'm sorry.
The question I have is, in most of the applications where we find massing, large walls and even on buildings, we generally try and get some sort of in and out type of deal. And I'm wondering, I don't know if your designer is here tonight, but I would be interested to see if there's a way, rather than just have this massive wall, and I'm only looking at pictures, so it's hard to say, but all I can see is this wall along 205 down by Powell and Division and down there, those big, huge, 40-foot walls. That's all I can envision, and I'm just wondering if you could set every so far set something back so it gives you a little different texture or something. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, I like the design because it's not a big square wall. It actually looks like it's got some flow to it, and it follows the land. I just wonder if you could kind of I don't call it a wave or whatever, something with articulation.
Well, I'm not sure how much actual in and out articulation we could do, but I think what we might be able to do is try to find some complementary finishes, or try to do something to break up the wall, maybe with either texture, making sure it just doesn't become a hodgepodge kind of mess, but maybe do it more with vertical elements amongst the blocking or something like that.
We do a lot of that. I've noticed it down in Arizona, in a lot of these things that they've done it with art and things like beautiful work. They've done, and you can look at a 12-foot. It looks like a 12-foot art piece, really, is what it looks like. And I'm not sure how you do that here in the Northwest. They can't do it, obviously, with Southwestern art, but something along those lines where they do a color change every so often, and I don't know what it is, but to me it seems like that masking would be almost too much. So I don't.
It does. Let's see. It does get broken up by the Holcomb over crossing, so that you might want to keep that in mind, because that's sort of a significant structure right smack down in the middle of the whole wall, and that'll break it up like that. For that, you can see in the top of this on the wall plan. It shows where the bridge is and where the start of the wall and the end of the wall is. Not to say that I don't. Actually, I do like your idea, Sheriff Powell, and something that we could look at.
Well, if the decision on the materials or anything haven't been made yet, it'd be interesting to get some different perspective on that. And it doesn't. And again, articulation is a great word. I wish I had it. It doesn't. I'm not expecting that type of thing. I know it's difficult to build to, and
the structural engineering gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, next thing you know, you'll see 1962 Fords parked in, in those pockets that you built. So I'm not interested in that. I don't have a problem with the idea of that wall. It's something to break that monotony, if you will, of that wall.
Or it may be a matter of just variegation in the texture at various intervals, so that you don't just have 800 feet of the same texture.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, he always pulled up a good one. Okay, well, thanks. That's
So I
my comment.
Go
ahead.
Another question about the wall, the wall one. So it's necessary because we have to grade the east side of the highway at the lane. Right?
Yes.
And the existing terrain there is so steep already that we need something to hold the hill up.
That's right.
Or to keep the hill from coming down.
Yes.
Okay, so, and it's going to be 18 feet tall, so I'm curious, in elevation, where does that bring the top of the wall relative to the surface of the Holcomb overpass?
Do you know the answer to that question? Or Elisa? Or Romanus? How high is the overpass? Do you know that?
It's going to be way higher.
Yes.
Yeah, please, come up.
I think this is probably on. Just say who you are.
So I'm Hermanus Stein with Kettleson and Associates, and I've been involved in this area related to some of the improvements on 213 since 2006. So the Holcomb underpass, as you can see on your screen, it's the grade on it as you come from the neighborhood to the east. It's basically sloping down across. So on this side, where you under the highway, that's where it's 16 feet or between 16 and 17 feet. And then the road on Highway 213, as you travel towards I-205, it has a super elevation that basically drains to the inside of the curve again. So that space becomes bigger on the east side. So although we have 16 to 17 feet clearance on this side, on the other side we have a way that range is fairly larger, and that's why an 18-foot wall, there's more room. Probably, and I don't know the details as Bob also mentioned, those details we still work at, and we can provide those details as needed. But this is the topography of the two road facilities. It's not as you approach, I mean, it's almost like a wedge that you'll see traveling towards the I-205.
It's kind of an unusual layout.
So I'm understanding that the wall is nearly as tall as the overpass is.
It's shorter, isn't
It's
it?
actually shorter, I believe.
I'm just curious, is it 5 feet shorter?
I mean, we'll definitely take a look at it and
Yeah.
get back to you. So.
All right. Add another question.
It's at least 5 feet shorter, because
Okay.
I'm thinking there's.
And there's a fence on top of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I want to ask another question about, so I can understand wall 2 a little bit more. There's cut slope, and then the wall sits on top of cut slope. Is- Here we are.
You want to come up to the microphone, please?
Thank you.
So on the wall elevation view, it's it's difficult to see here, but the wall actually is both it retains the cut and the fill slope. As you go along the length of the wall, it goes from a cut to a fill wall. The section we provide on this exhibit shows it as a fill wall supporting the sidewalk. As you get closer to Oregon 213, it's actually a cut wall.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
One more question. This may sound odd, and I'm not sure how else to ask it, but when you have that length of wall, and from a traffic perspective, from a driver's perspective, and you're coming around a curve, has there been any studies done on speed increases when you're against a wall like that? It seems to me, anyway, from driving in places where they have those types of things, people seem to speed up. And you're coming into an intersection there. And I'm just wondering if there's ever been any studies about that with a wall that doesn't really allow you to see, anything off to your right. I'm not sure how to ask that question. I was just curious.
He's our traffic expert. And we're actually going into a roundabout here, which people.
I'm sorry. I'm talking on wall one. I apologize. That's on wall one. Yeah, because you're coming into that intersection, not the roundabout. That makes sense to me. The other one.
I see.
So the one thing is that the wall is on the inside of the curve. So as you travel northbound towards the interchange, your vision is not necessarily towards the wall. It's basically away from the wall. A lot of the research studies that has been done is the NCHRP report, which is the National Highway Research Program, Corporate Highway Research Program. It's a report 613, I believe, that talks about transition zones. So it's basically coming from a high-speed facility into a slow-speed environment. And as we travel north on this expressway, the introduction of a signal, and as we travel further north, there's a change in character that's going to happen. So the wall might be in one way, might actually help, and especially when there's this discussion about the texture and those type of things, it's providing more cue for the public, because if you travel itself is it's fairly wide open. So as soon as you start narrowing things up, and that's what the research showed, if you actually start narrowing things up, the speed actually started slowing down. So the other thing is what you also need to understand is this is on the inside of the curve. There's this thing I call stopping sight distance. So if you're in travel in this lane and something happens basically around this curve, also in the outside lane, there's a car emergency stop or something like that. They need to see around that wall. So again, I think there's enough that will actually more encourage slower speeds than trying to increase speeds.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Do you have any questions of Christian or Conrad?
I did have a question regarding the stormwater ditches that you talked about. So even if there are a conveyance of wildlife, you know, I mean, and I think that particular picture you showed, you do see wildlife transitioning through that ditch, and I'm assuming that's not going away. I don't know. We didn't even get to that point, but I'm just wondering, do they not consider that that stormwater ditch as a conveyance if you actually are conveying animals through it?
Yeah, so the conveyance for the stormwater ditches just relates to conveyance of water,
Right.
Not conveyance of wildlife. I have seen, I think, geese in that area before, but conveyance just refers to flow of water.
Right. So from your perspective, I understand that. It's just I'm just curious about if you're transitioning from preparing it from that type of environment into and on the other side we have Abernathy Creek, and you do see a lot of animals crossing and going down through that area, and I'm wondering, is there any crossings available, or is there any way that wildlife can get through this new intersection?
Yeah, so there's a few things that are going to be happening for the project. There are going to be impacts to the ditches, including the one that was shown in the photograph. But what we're proposing to do, and this is actually through the Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of State Lands, they're regulating the removal of ditches. We're replacing ditches. I believe I have the numbers actually. We're removing, I think it's about 0.2 acres of ditch throughout the project, and we are replacing that with 0.33 acres of new ditch. I don't have the numbers right here in front of me. So that replacement through the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of State Lands, they still have to approve that replacement, but we're expecting full approval of that. So there will be replacement of those ditches. One of the other things that we're looking at for wildlife movement is the creation of a mitigation site. We're proposing it. The enhancement of that site, because there is the Union Pacific Bridge, Highway 213 crosses over the top of the railway there. We will be creating a much nicer area for wildlife, and they will be able to move under that bridge there. So we're expecting that wildlife will utilize that area much more because of the improvement of habitat and the crossings available there. And they're actually even able to cross under I-205 just south of the mitigation site also. So enhancement of this area will truly improve that wildlife corridor passage in this area.
So you're talking about changing or replacing the old open ditches with a closed ditch?
No, actually, there will be open ditches. The 0.33 acres will be all open ditches that will provide the water quality and the wildlife habitat that are existing now, more so than they are now, actually, because we're creating more ditch.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I just had a question of clarification. The reason for the need of this retaining wall, one, is that because Highway 213 is being widened at that location? So as I read it, it appears that there's 3 lanes on either side of the highway at that location as it passes under the Holcomb Bridge.
Right. And then the left turn lane.
Is there any change in the elevation of the highway, or is it strictly just a matter of the widening?
Just widening. There might be some minor changes that we would like to match as closely as we can. Is that right, Bob?
Just a question about the ditches. These are engineered soils. They're not just, or is it just cut and you're going to plant grass over it? Or
That's a really good question. One of the things that we wanted to avoid was calling a historic stream a ditch. Even if you take a historic stream and you channelize it, it's still a stream. It has a natural water source, and it does merit protection. And we have gone into all of the historic areas that we could find, looking for all the historic streams in the area. And we have decided that there are 3 streams in the area, and they're detailed in all the reports. We call them Stream 14, 15, and 16. What we were very careful about was to take those streams and call them streams, and to take the stormwater drainage ditches, which were cut just for the purposes of conveying stormwater, and call them ditches to keep them separate. And so we're proposing the buffers around all the streams, anything that was historically a stream, even though a lot of them are channelized now, and not proposing buffers around the features that are only conveying stormwater during precipitation events.
Were you kind of asking what they're going to look like first?
not necessarily, just that what I understand is that if it's a stream, you want to keep it as a stream, so you're not going to be engineering in that space.
Right.
If it's a cut for the conveyance of stormwater, it sounds like you're going to leave a cut for the conveyance of stormwater and not do additional engineering. That's what I understood.
There are some ditches that will be filled for the project, and in those cases, they're literally moving stormwater treatment and conveyance facilities typically next to, and some of the engineers could talk more about where they're relocating those to, but yeah, does that?
Yeah, so you're going to be collecting stormwater as appropriate, it sounds like, and maintaining the integrity of the strength of that. Yeah.
And the engineering that will go into those ditches is for slope and for landscaping. We'll be planting new landscaping, and some of them are designed for water quality, so that's the engineering that goes into them, is creating the correct slopes and edges and the right soil to have in the bottom and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Is that any more of the applicant, Nancy, any more?
We're finished with our presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you. Okay, well, I will call for any comment from the public, which I don't see of any here. So, at this time, I just will close this public hearing and bring it up here to the commission for further discussion. And again, we're here to, obviously we're discussing just the WR1002 and BR1001. Okay, and then
Yeah, exactly. I imagine there are plans and designs that are way beyond the scope of what we're looking at tonight. This is a project that's been going on for a long, long time. So, I'm impressed with the amount of work that's gone into this to date, and I'm impressed with the amount of public input that's been solicited over time for this project. I'm aware that a project like this has been needed on that side of town for a long, long time, and it just appears to me that that Public Works has done a good job, and that their consultants have done a good job, and I'm in agreement with the staff's report and the recommendations and recommended conditions of approval.
Yeah, me too. Actually, this has been one of the most thorough reports for sure that we've seen. I mean, this was really a well done work so far. I guess I really like everything. I really like this idea of sort of centralizing, not centralizing, but consolidating this the mitigation area to make more than just the sum of the parts. And I think I like that strategy. And I guess my only concern is one that's been brought up before, and that would be just these retaining walls, especially number one. And now that I hear more about it with traffic stopping at Redland Road on the other side, now they're heading south, and they can see across, and they can see it. So I think it's going to be a rather important piece for our city. And oftentimes these kinds of things are really just mundane, and they don't really contribute to any place. They seem to be anonymous, and we just really have an opportunity to really improve that. And I know that the Washington Street Bridge that Nancy worked on before, if the kind of detailing that occurs there occurs at this, I know that we'll be in good hands, that's for sure. So there was just a lot of really good thought in that bridge. So I'm very much in favor of moving this forward.
Well, I would echo the other commissioners' comments, and I would just say that my biggest concern is really the appearance of the retaining walls. And as Tim indicated in his comments, I think it would be really advantageous if there was some articulation in the either the shape or the texture of that wall, so it didn't just appear to be a long monolith. But I think the appearance of both of the retaining walls is important. But I would echo the comments that the other commissioners have made. It appears to be a well thought out design proposal.
And I'll say the same thing. Everything I've seen so far, I've been impressed with, other than my comments, which you have now and you'll take care of, I'm sure. But I do want to say something, and Dan beat me to it, but I want to say that Nancy's done an excellent job on all the projects in the city that I've seen. She's really taken the needs of the many, and she's tried to tie all those things in, and I've done it, as far as I'm concerned, on almost every project. She's really come out ahead on all these and done a very good job. So I'm confident that it's going to be the right thing, and you have an excellent taste, and I'm sure that you'll be able to put together a wall that's going to fit for everyone, so that we can look at every single day when I go to work. So I appreciate the hard work, and I love the mitigation plan. It makes perfect sense. That's a great area, and I see long-term, again, depending on what happens to the metro, I see a real great opportunity down there to get another nice amenity into the city for the Cove and the river projects, that type of thing. So I support it as well. So at this time, then, I guess we'll look for a motion.
I'll move to approve planning files WR 10-02, US 10-01, and VR 10-01 with conditions of approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Tony?
Commissioner Tidwell.
Aye.
Commissioner Lajoie.
Aye.
Commissioner Stein. Aye. Chair Paul.
Aye. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'll just give you a quick update of what's been going on. So, as most of you are aware, we did schedule a special hearing for next Monday, August 30th. We'll be hearing the concept master plan, now the general master plan, for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County out in Park Place. So for their redevelopment of that parcel up there, so that'll be being brought forward for a public hearing next Monday. We'll also have a request for a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change for a property across from the high school. That it's unique, and it'll be an interesting policy discussion that you folks will be able to have next week concerning a property that was brought into the UGB in 1979. Had a comprehensive plan designation. We went through and did our updates in 2004 when we did our UGB expansions and changed the comp plan designation to future urban. Beaver Creek concept plan was approved and remanded by LUBA. So just raises some interesting questions, and we'll be bringing that forward for you next week as well. We've also As you may recall, we've gone through the urban and rural reserve process, and we identified areas around the city that we're going to designate as urban reserves. And it's been a quick 5 years, and we are back looking at should we expand UGB or not. Wow. So the COO for Metro has come out with their recommendation of areas to look at. So they're looking at about 8,000 acres throughout the region. They've included as a potential property to look at, as you may recall, just north of the Beaver Creek Concept Plan. It's kind of the Maple Lane area. So they've included that area as a potential area to look at. So we're holding a hearing on September 1st in front of the City Commission for any other parcels or properties that folks want to bring forward that for the commission to consider if they'd like to forward to Metro to look at for potential UGB expansion areas. I'm sure there'll probably be some discussion about the decision of the COO to include that property at this time. I know one of the big issues when the urban growth report came out, they've been working on this for a couple of years now. The full effect of this recession that we're in right now hadn't taken place. So a lot of the assumptions were prior to the complete slowdown in housing that we've seen over the last couple of years. And what that report came out with was that population growth is still going to continue on, and they identified somewhere between roughly 28,000 and 104,000 new housing units were going to be needed over the next 20 years. And then kind of broke it down into thirds, and they identified the middle third when the urban growth report came out. And so now the question is that assumption still accurate? So Metro went through and they looked at upzonings that have happened in the city, infill rates. They've increased some of those. They have a program called Metroscape that looks at the probability of developing land and make some assumptions on land use and transportation improvements, and then what would happen in terms of the redevelopment and the densities that you'd see. And so what they found was that through the upzonings and comprehensive plan amendments and urban renewal districts that have been formed and transportation improvements that have either been created or are funded to happen, that they're estimating approximately 33,000 additional housing units already within the UGB that they estimate would come online in the next 20 years. So they hit their minimum. So we're talking about 24 or 28,000 is the minimum needed. So that is the larger debate and the discussion of, do we need more at this time? We're looking at it again in 5 years. Do we need to hit that middle third? Do we want to be at the high end? Do we want to be at the low end? So I think that the discussions are just beginning, but they would like any other lands that we would like them to look at by September 3rd. Then they'll be open for public comment through the end of September, and they're hoping they issue a decision in December of 2010 this year. So with that, yep. We have nothing new to report on the Cove at this time. We're still working with the developers, see if we can come up with alternatives for that site or additional partners to be a part of that project. And I guess just going back, we did on the UGB expansion area proposals. We did have one property owner come in. They're going to submit some information hopefully tomorrow, but then additional information before the hearing on September 1st for the City Commission to consider. And it's about an 8.5 acre parcel at the end of Davis, up by the hospital. It's kind of a piece that's right on top of Newell Creek Canyon back there. It's up on top before you kind of dive down into Abernethy Creek and that watershed down in there. And they are outside of our current urban growth boundary, but they are within an urban reserve. So they will probably be bringing that forward for the commission's consideration. But other than that, we haven't had any other requests around any of the urban reserves around Oregon City. Okay. With that, it's starting to see some building permits come in, but it's still pretty slow on the land use side in terms of subdivision. It's probably gonna be pretty slow for quite a while, just based on how many platted subdivisions we have out there that haven't been constructed.
Right. Okay, very good. No commercial, nothing in the commercial world happening.
So, yeah, we do have
4-story and Hilltop Mall.
Yeah, that was my next question, is where's that at?
safe for the Hilltop Mall. It's in the completeness still.
What's that?
But that will be a master plan and a detailed plan that will come before the planning commission at some point. But at this point, we're still in the completeness stage of that application.
Yeah, thank you for getting that intersection done.
Nancy,
Yeah, it was funny. That was quite the project.
at the last city commission hearing, they kind of walked through kind of some of the issues that they ran into in terms of unidentified utilities in the street that they hit a couple times, that the contractors ran into that weren't on any plans, any as-built, some culverts that were in much worse shape than what they originally found once they dug in there and got underneath the asphalt. Some inconsistencies in the base rock layering. So initially you're just going to take the asphalt off and repave, and then they ended up needing to bring and take out some rock, put in some rock just because of the inconsistencies in the base layer that was originally laid down for Warner Milne. So it seemed like they kind of caught a lot of snafus on that one as they walked through it. The promenade went pretty smooth, and that one they just seemed to kept hitting things. And then because of where the funding was coming from on it, just the amount of paperwork that went into every change order or issue that they ran into was just mountains and mountains of paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we built a Malal. I mean, it seems like we built Beaver Creek Road faster than we finished that.
Yeah.
That was an amazing project.
Mhm.
I figured something had to go on with it, but it was pretty tedious.
Yes, and we had Ms. Butler, one of our planners, working helping with on the permitting and paperwork side of that, and I can attest that it was a bit over the top for the size of the project and related to some of the change order requests that were being put in.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's something we can address. I think Nancy would like to talk to ODA, the state and the feds about how much actually goes into the paperwork needed to move a project along when you do run into some issues that like we did.
Yeah.
But it's a good project. It's aligned. Hopefully the stormwater feature works well. Looks good. So unfortunately it ran a couple months longer, but it'll last a long time.
Miss Butler is now Miss Sherwood.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. As of Saturday.
Well, congratulations, wherever you are. Very good. And then the Pueblo realignment. I noticed that went pretty quickly through there. That I didn't realize I was still in the transportation plan.
Well, that one, when we did the land use application on that, we actually entered into a developer's agreement for that project. So that developer's agreement was still in place, and so I think we're on. Well, the second owner, it went from the original owner to the bank, and then it was bought, and they're in there getting the work done. Last time I think they still had some striping to do. The last time I was out there, but most, the paving's done, the gutters are in, so that one is actually moving forward. It's a smaller, I think it's an 8 or 9 lot subdivision, but they're moving along. So that was done by the developer. There were some SEC credits that are going to happen when the housing units come online for the amount of right-of-way dedication that was associated with it, and plus oversizing the road from a normal local street to a larger right-of-way.
And then one other question, this is kind of all the years that we've sat up here. There's a lot of projects that we've approved, and you kind of mentioned the subdivisions, but some of these other applications, I guess we don't really need to revisit them unless they want to reply them. But like the church on land. Wanting to build a bigger church, and some of these other projects. I mean, they just run out of their time, and then if they don't reapply, you have to go do it again, right?
Correct. Like the church on Lynn, we did a master plan. So they could come in. They're still within their time horizon. Things have just slipped a little bit on that, but they didn't. Can't remember if they did a detailed plan or not, but it's expired.
Initially, we did. I don't know that we ever finished going through the whole thing. I was curious. That was something that was supposed to happen within a year.
Right. And we see with Clackamas Community College, they're a little bit behind the schedule that we approved, but their phasing is still there. Once they start to bump up against the backside of that approval is when we'll be revisiting that. Because there were some transportation assumptions made on a date certain of completion of the project, which would then have to be amended.
Mm-hmm. And then the last question I had was about the new education building down at the church by Carnegie. That has to city commission.
Right.
So it's in process now.
They still had to come back to Historic Review Board did they have to come back?
I think they're done. That fence required a right-of-way permit, and that was it. And no other reviews were necessary.
Okay. Yeah. So they should be moving forward.
We applied for a demo permit on the preschool, and they had to submit a salvage plan that met the condition of approval. So they submitted the salvage plan, waited the appropriate amount of time, tried to get it on the market, and that didn't work. So we're moving ahead with the demolition, and we have photographs of the building inside and out for the permanent land use file.
Very good.
Yeah.
But the only one you will see is road soils. And it's probably going to need to come in and amend their master plan again. It looks like they've purchased another property on First Street Court, another building. So that would be 3 that they now own. So they're going to have to amend their master plan boundary, add that property in. Not exactly sure what the use is going to be right now. I think they're still working on that. But so we just had a pre-app with them last week, so we'll probably see that next couple months here. But that would also come in front of the commission.
Okay, now I can answer all the questions people ask. Are you ready to?
The code we adopted is in place.
Yay!
At the beginning of August, so
That's a long process. A good process.
And done. Yeah.
Okay, well, very good then. If there is no other business, we are adjourned for the day. Thank you very much.